What is up, faithful? Welcome back to Clutch Gene Sports. I'm your host, Marco Martinez, here with my guy, Rohan Chakravarti. How's it going, my man?
Good. We're moved into a new spot. I'm excited for the start of the season. We're here. Football's finally back. Just a couple of days away for the Niners. But we're all excited here. How you doing, my guy?
Doing good, man. Can't complain. Vibes are all the way back for the 49ers, man. They extend Brandon Aiyuk. They double up and get Trent back into the building right away. Vibes are back, right? But there's still questions and concerns regarding the 49ers, right? Like, obviously, there's a Super Bowl hangover that everyone likes to talk about. Now, let's get straight into it before we get into any of the other teams and stuff like that. Obviously, what are your thoughts on Brandon Aiyuk's extension? Trent Williams extend or restructure, not an extension. What are your thoughts on those two players back in the building? What does it mean for the 49ers moving forward? And then we'll get into their expectations and what we're expecting from the 49ers this season.
Yeah, I usually write, an article pretty much on each of these major contracts. Did not get the chance yet to do one for Brandon Aiyuk, but we'll start with him because his was obviously the more high profile one, the one that was publicly aired out. The 49ers and Aiyuk finally reached a deal last week, 4 years, 120 million. The big number, 77 million guaranteed in total guarantees. And then you obviously get the 45 million, I believe, guaranteed at signing with a 23 million signing bonus. And so when you combine all of these together, what do you kind of get? You get a deal Brown deal. That was the one that I kind of compared this one to. And I think, you heard Brent Ayuk's wide receiver coach back in June say if he gets something similar to Ara, he's going to take that. And of course, not all the numbers are similar. Aiyuk gets a little bit more when it comes to guarantees, in terms of total guarantees and things like that. But I think that this deal is a pretty good deal for both sides. The Niners get it done. Aiyuk, obviously, he waited his turn and he got his good deal. So I think things are looking here for the Niners, and you're glad to get it done before week 1.
Yeah, and absolutely. Like when you look at Brandon Ayuk's deal, like it's good for him to hold out and do everything he had to do in his power to get that deal done, right? Like when you look at it, the Niners are offering. I had reported it was around 24 to start, around April time, right before the draft. It was around 24. After the draft, they started offering around 26, and then it kept increasing, right? After every contract or whatever the case may be, the Niners weren't talking to him for a few months. The offer just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So from 24 to 30, that's a lot of money in terms of average per year. You get to see a lot more in terms of guaranteed money. Obviously, the years of
StreamYard is back with the BS. They just kicked me out of my own stream, and I don't know what's going on. We good though.
so yeah, so also as I was saying, like shout out to Brandon Aiyuk for doing what he had to do to get his money, right? Like at the end of the day, it's a good deal for both sides, but I feel like Brandon Aiyuk got the 49ers to meet him where he wanted to get paid, right? Like he obviously was 24.5 and then getting to the 30, the guarantees. Shout out to Trent Williams for understanding that he wanted guaranteed money in 2 years. I reported that as well. As soon as they turned it into a 2-year guaranteed contract, he would be back. Niners did that. He's back right away. Man, vibes are back. Now, the only issue, Rohan, is when you have high expectations, you go to a Super Bowl and you lose, especially the way the 49ers lost in the Super Bowl in overtime and not knowing the overtime rules. And we could talk about so many things that went the wrong way for the 49ers. What are their expectations this year? And will the 49ers have a Super Bowl hangover, or do you feel like this roster is built to surpass and get over the hump and not have to deal with the hangover?
I think expectations this year should be, as high as they've kind of been in the past. And what do I mean by that? I think when you're talking about this team, this is Super Bowl. It's a Super Bowl caliber team, right? And so I don't know why the expectation should change when not much of the roster has changed. if you're talking about stars that departed the team this year, the one that you could point to was Arik Armstead, who the 49ers cut with a post-June first move, a guy who has been good in his career here, but also has been injured. The Niners elected to replace Armstead with a variation of Malik Collins and Jordan Elliott. We'll see how they can amount in Armstead's shoes. But for the most part, you get a core that was one of the best, if not the best in the NFL, back. Christian McCaffrey is back. Brandon Aiyuk is back. Trent Williams is back. Deebo Samuel is back. George Kittle is back. And that's only on the offensive side. And I'm not even talking about Brock Purdy, right? Defensively, Fred Warner, Nick Bosa, I could go on and on. The entire core of one of the best teams in the NFL is back. And so the expectation has to be a Super Bowl, and to get there, if you're talking about even going, if you're talking about steps before that, NFC, your expectation should be the 1 seed to win the division. And overall, though, the expectation should be to win the Super Bowl, even though you've come short in the last few years.
And when you talk about, obviously, like, the expectations are so high, sky high, right? Do you think they meet the expectations, right? Like, because you have the roster, you have a great offensive coach or head coach, whatever we want to call him, right? In my opinion, he's a top 5 head coach, whether you want to argue with it or not. Like, that's fine. Like, he's no worse than top 10, right? A head coach, offensive wise or whatever. Now, with Kyle Shanahan having the best roster he's ever had. Now, we could argue the O-line still stinks or whatever. I'm tired of arguing the O-line stinks, right? You have Aaron Banks, who was drafted in the 2nd round. You have Dominic Puny, who's going to be starting at right guard, who was drafted in the 3rd round. You have a left tackle who's in Hall of Fame, first ballot, one of the best left tackles to ever play in the NFL. Now, your center and your right tackle, they're guys that you didn't draft in the Colt McKivitz you did draft later in the draft, and then your center's a journeyman. So when you look at the Niners offensive line, 3 of those guys should be solid for them, right? You drafted Puny and Banks early in the draft. You should not have that bad of an offensive line. It should be middle of the pack, if not better. If the 49ers don't win the Super Bowl, what is the reason they don't? Because they have everything they do. What is the reason they don't, Rohan? Is it a regression from Brock Purdy? Is it Kyle Shanahan? The defense? What would be the reason?
I think if they don't, to be honest, I couldn't tell you. At this stage, it's like that in the sense they have all the pieces together. If they don't win the Super Bowl, it would be a variation of things. You definitely have to involve Kyle Shanahan probably in there. If they don't, I'm assuming, the most important position on the field, the quarterback, will be in play. Just, I think it'd be a variation of things. But when you talk about the problems from last year, right, a lot of things were attributed to Steve Wilks. Well, Steve Wilks is not here anymore. You elected to go with the first-year defensive coordinator. Could that be the issue? Maybe. But then again, that falls on the higher-ups, right? Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch for making that decision, just like they did with Steve Wilks. And so really, if you're trying to find one source to compound or to try and create a reason for the problem, it's going to have to be as high as the food chain goes, I would say, if the problems are recurring. But right now there aren't excuses because the problems that you had last year, you're looking to fix. I would say the one underrated one that we have both mentioned before is the run defense. How is the run defense going to be this year? Because you don't have your top run defender anymore in Arik Armstead. Subsequently, though, you expect a year up from Nick Bosa, so hopefully the edge play is better. Yetur Gross-Matos, Leonard Floyd. Gross-Matos is better run defender. You probably, you're hoping for a good play from them, but how is the run defense as a whole going to be? And that's just one problem. But ultimately, the goal should be a Super Bowl. And if it doesn't happen, you got to point to the higher ups for the reason for not coming together and getting it done.
And I agree. Like, something like the like, for me, the reason would have to be probably a huge regression from, at least, to not make a deep push. Now, Super Bowl would be like a conversation for why didn't they win it. Would be a conversation for how they lost in the playoffs or in the Super Bowl. But when I'm looking at, like, how do they not make a deep run or whatever the case may be, have to be a big regression from Brock, which, I mean, it's possible, but I don't see a huge regression happening. Now, I do see regression happening, though. I don't think the numbers, the stats that he put up, the top one at almost every category statistically, is pretty hard to maintain, right? We've seen a lot of quarterbacks be at that spot and then they'll drop off to the mid tens or whatever the case may be. So when I'm looking at the offense, I think offense should be high fire, like putting up 30 points a game. They have no reason to not put up 30 points. You have a run game, you have the receiving core to do it, and a quarterback to do it. That's not including the tight end, who you can consider part of the offensive line or the receiving core because he's that damn good. Defensively, run defense is going to struggle a little bit to start the season until they finally figure out what the best unit to have on first down is, or base down running defense. And that also means Jordan Elliott might be a starter, in my opinion. I think Jordan Elliott may have to start to help with the run defense. I think Yetur Gross-Matos should start at the edge position for run defense. So when I'm looking at the 49ers, you kept mentioning higher ups. And there was a report that came out from Grant Kahn, and some of the guys reported this as a source telling them what happened. They mentioned that Lynch and Shanahan are on the hot seat if the 49ers do not win a Super Bowl. Do you think either of those guys are on the hot seat if the 49ers do not win a Super Bowl this year, with the way they've gone pretty much all in on retaining the core, retaining the group of guys they had, rather than getting better and letting some of those guys walk or trading some of those guys away to get better in other spots?
No, I don't. I really don't see an avenue where they get fired. I know we've talked in the last few off seasons about John Lynch potentially leaving should the 49ers win a Super Bowl, because he said in the past that he doesn't anticipate being in this role. Like, this is like his future. You know, he's had a healthy career broadcasting, playing, and now as a GM for the last few years, you know. And so to me, I don't see either of them being on the hot seat. They just signed extensions through the 2027 season. And I think everybody in the world knows that Kyle Shanahan would be the hottest guy probably on the market next year, even over Bill Belichick. And that's saying something, you know, if he were to hit the coaching carousel. I don't think that there's any way, really, at least any realistic way, I'll say that, because I don't
He's
see
probably
this
the head
49ers
coach, to
team.
be honest with you. If he's fired, he's the head coach of the Bears next year.
Wow. Yep. That could be the case. I mean, I would not be
Imagine
surprised.
pairing him if you're the Bears ownership, right? Like, and the Bears fans probably don't want to hear this because they want to have a good season where their head coach doesn't get fired. But even if he does get fired, right? You have Kyle Shanahan on the open market. There's going to be teams that are willing to do something like that, where they fire a head coach who had a good season and they have a young quarterback that they want to pair with him. Imagine that. Kyle Shanahan going from Brock Purdy to Caleb Williams, to some are comparing to Patrick Mahomes. So you're not wrong. He would be the hottest head coach on the market. And I think that's something that would happen immediately for the Chicago Bears. Their ownership would have to discuss that.
Right. And this goes back to the point of, does he get fired? No. And I'm saying this with any realistic situation. I don't see the 49ers missing the playoffs. There would be a number of injuries likely that would have to happen for the 49ers to miss the playoffs. And so that's why I don't see that happening. And if that's the reason, you usually won't blame the head coach, even though it would be a very disappointing season. I don't see either getting fired. Now, could you see, you know, maybe John Lynch
fired?
leaves if the Niners? I don't think he gets fired, though.
Rohan, so he may not get fired, but if he steps away or they mutually part ways because he wants to go to the media, but he's about to get fired, because you could word it in a certain way, right? Like, hey, search for a media job. You know you could get one because you're about to fire you.
Yeah, but I also, like, we've known that Lynch could depart during one of these off seasons. So I don't know how much I would consider that being a firing. Now, they did say that they might be upset at John Lynch and Shanahan. And I think this one may be more directed towards Lynch for the handling of the Aiyuk situation, because if we're being honest, the 49ers pay less dollars if they get this deal, if John Lynch gets his deal done earlier. You know, if he adds that third year, or if he adds a couple of more guaranteed money in that third year earlier, or if they get this deal done hammered back in March or whenever, you know, they first started to, you know, sit down and try and hammer out talks, maybe that's the dispute where, yeah, you understood you were wrong on this one. You misread the market, and it cost your owner probably a couple of million of dollars, you know? And so maybe that's where it is, but I don't see a firing for either of them.
And this is a good point. And I mean, you could argue that he's not a good fit for him. But what I'm saying is the ownership would make Kyle a priority as a Bears organization, or Jerron Mayo doesn't do too well. Drake May sits for a year, and Kyle may have liked Drake May. The Patriots ownership do something crazy where they fire their first year head coach and hire Kyle Shanahan. I'm just saying, I'm just throwing the hypotheticals out there. I agree with 808 Niner. I don't think they would fire Kyle. I think they would trade him or openly say, we want to move Kyle Shanahan as a head coach. Get off of him. I don't think Kyle gets moved I don't think he gets traded. I don't think he gets fired. So I hit up my guys who gave me the information regarding Brandon Aiyuk and Trent Williams. They said there's some life to both, but they said it's more so on the Lynch side than the Kyle Shanahan side. They said, look, Lynch decided to ask people to take pay cuts. Armstead, Juice, he decided that people needed to take pay cuts to keep everyone around. That was, he builds the top 90. So what happened was him doing all this, not getting better overall, is something that the organization is looking at from a Lynch standpoint, right? So I think at the end of the day, Lynch would be the scapegoat if he was to get fired. Now, I don't think he would get fired. I think he would walk away in the sense of getting a TV contract or getting hired by TV or however everything else is working. The Niners would do it a certain way where it doesn't look like he gets fired because they don't want to have that reputation of Jed York stepping in and getting involved. They would let John Lynch know, and this is kind of where I'm coming from, where they would let John Lynch know, hey, look, we're not happy with you. We want to fire you. But we'd rather you look for something else before we fire you because we don't want you to look like you got fired, and we'd rather you step away on your own terms so your media-wise doesn't look bad on you. Because sometimes when people get fired from an organization, sometimes there's other reason that teams or organizations do not hire somebody. So I think that would be more realistic than anything. Rohan, you think the Niners don't have a Super Bowl hangover because of the roster? I think the same thing. I think they make a deep run. The question is are the 49ers better than last year or are they worse than last year? Or are they the same? I'll give you a third option, or same.
I think the 49ers, are they better or worse than last year? That's a good question. Because if you look at it, right, Troy's just generally from a roster standpoint, when you're looking at the losses, the biggest loss, like I said, was Ark Armstead. So you're probably worse at defensive tackle, even though you added 2 guys. But are you better at defensive end? You lost Chase Young. You just added Leonard Floyd. You added Yetur Gross-Matos. And more importantly, the biggest additions that this team is going to make now from a year-end basis is the draft. And you have a starter in Dominic Puny, who might be your second best offensive lineman right now. And you probably have a frontline starter at at cornerback. I think that those 2 positions are going to be pretty key when it comes down to it. And so I think you could argue that they're better or the same, despite certain, a few losses here and there.
And I think I agree with you, right? Like, it's hard to dictate whether they're better or worse because they lost key guys on the D-line. They've gained key guys on the D-line. Secondary got much better. I think the offensive line got a little bit better. The running game should get better because Mason is coming into his own. Receiving game should get better with Jacob Cowing and eventually Ricky Pearsall stepping in. Prayers go out to him, and hopefully he has a speedy recovery. Glad everything is good on his end. But this comment's pretty interesting. 808 Niner says, I have more respect for Lynch after hearing him talk yesterday. He's always stand up and takes the shots, and Kyle is the biggest shield. We all know who calls the shots, and it ain't John. I think they both have a lot of say in the organization. I think John Lynch is a PR person where He's naturally trained in the media. He knows how to handle the media. So him standing in front of the camera talking is huge, right? Like it's something that Kyle wanted when he was hiring a general manager. So I think to me, that is important. But I think you could also hire somebody who is a legitimate GM who could also handle the media. For example, for example, Adam Peters goes over to the Commanders. I think Adam Peters has handled the media phenomenal, and he hasn't really been a media guy in front of cameras and being interviewed like that. He's been phenomenal answering questions. So I think you can find someone like John Lynch who gets more power. And I think the Niners decided to do anything with their coaching staff or with their general manager. I think it would be take away some power from Kyle Shanahan and hire a general manager who comes in and has equal or more power than Kyle Shanahan. And I think that's something that's very possible. Now, I want to get to every division, Rohan. So we have some time to talk about briefly, just real quick on every division. I know Roger Morales has asked for this conversation to be had. So I thought about, you know what, we'll do it earlier in the week. So if we do decide to record again before Monday Night Football, we could have the conversation of what teams we expect to win the division and how we expect some of those teams to go. So it gives us a good 40-minute to talk about it. Eventually, we'll get back into the 49ers when we talk the NFC West and how the Niners should shape up in the NFC West. But let's get straight to the AFC South. Let's go. You know what? We'll start with AFC North. So for those who are unfamiliar with the AFC North is probably one of the toughest divisions in the NFL. You got the Ravens, the Bengals, Browns, and Steelers. Obviously, the Steelers wanted Brandon Aiyuk, so it's kind of interesting that happened. Rohan, what's your takeaway when it comes to the AFC North? Or who's your number one seed, or who do you expect to possibly be coming out and being one of the better teams in that division, which is a very hard division to be in?
Yeah, I think that this has a argument to be the best division in football, right? All four of these teams, I think, have a chance to make the playoffs. The Baltimore Ravens, I think that they're at the top. They're the team that, was one of the strongest teams last year. Lamar Jackson, obviously the MVP. And when you look at that team, it's still got a good amount of the pieces overall that allowed them to succeed. Now, they do lose Mike McDonald, right? Mike McDonald he is going to be a key loss, but they have an internal hire. I believe Chris Orr is their defensive coordinator. And when you look at that team, you're still pretty confident that's going to be one of the top teams overall in the NFL, right? And so to me, that's why I have the Ravens as the number one team in this division, and might even be one of the top two teams, probably top two teams in the entire AFC right now. I think that they look really good, and so that's why I have them there. But when you look at the rest of the division, the Bengals, they should rebound, right? With Joe Burrow healthy, Jamar Chase and T. Higgins back in the fold, they should rebound. The Browns, they had a strong year last year, made the playoffs. You're hoping Deshaun Watson can reclaim some form of himself. And then the Pittsburgh Steelers, you add Russell Wilson, Justin Fields. You don't know how well they're going to play, but it's a Mike Tomlin team. Mike Tomlin still has found a way to be over 500 for God knows how long now.
And I think I'm going to agree with you on this one. I think the Ravens, I don't think you mentioned it, but the addition of Derrick Henry, I think that is a huge addition to them. Obviously, they've always been able to run the ball. They've been so successful with the ground and pound and the read option with Lamar Jackson and Zay Flowers coming into his second year there. I think their receiving core should be better with Nelson Aguilar being added. Rashad Bateman, hopefully he finally stays healthy. But man, like that team has a good offensive line. It has a good running game, good defense. So when I'm looking at them, I'm like, man, I'm excited to see how they do. Now, I wish they would have. I think Keaton Mitchell would have been huge for them. I believe he's out for the year. I could be wrong. He's on the PUP, so probably 6 weeks. But man, once they get him back, the Lightning and Thunder, that if he could get that speed back, the element with his knee, the Lightning and Thunder with him and Derrick Henry is going to be fun to watch. And that's something I'm very excited about to see. Now, Deshaun Watson, I don't think he'll ever get it back. I think his arm's shot. Now, he could prove us wrong, and if he does, he has a receiving core. He has a run game, has an elite defense, a good offensive line. So, I mean, there's all the answers there for a successful team. It just Deshaun Watson is the biggest question mark there. And if he's healthy and he's able to bounce back, they may be the second best team in the division because their defense is that good. Now, the Bengals, they should be up there, 1 or 2. Obviously, Joe Burrow, the bounce back. But they lost a lot of guys on defense. And that's going to affect you when it comes into it's going to affect you when it comes to the playoffs, where it comes to big games, those big moments. So I think it's going to be Baltimore. I think it's a toss-up for number 2, depending on how Deshaun Watson is or how the Bengals defense comes together. And I think the 4th team is obviously the Steelers, even though Mike Tomlin is such a great coach and no losing season and stuff like that. It's so hard to coach when you don't have a quarterback or you don't have certain, like, an offense needs to be able to put up points no matter who you are, how good your defense is. You got to put up points, man. And so for me, that's going to be what's interesting over there, how their quarterback situation. I think Justin Fields starts by midseason. I'd be shocked if he's not starting midseason because the run game, his run ability, I think Russell Wilson's going to probably struggle in the pass game. And if you bring Justin Fields, at least if he's struggling in the pass game, he at least gives you the element of the run to be able to do something. I think Russell Wilson's done. I think he's on the back end, and I think they're doing a great job of giving him his last opportunity. So shout out to over there. AFC South. This division I'm excited for. Reason why I'm excited for this division, if you're familiar with the divisions, it's the Texans, Colts, Jaguars, and Titans. You have a lot of young quarterbacks in this division.
The young ones, yeah.
It's a young division, young quarterbacks ran by, obviously, the best one, C.J. Stroud. Trevor Lawrence is in there, Anthony Richardson, and Will Levis. I'll always have Will Levis lower on my rankings no matter what because he puts mayo in his coffee, and that is the absolute most disgusting thing I've ever heard, no matter what. Rohan, thoughts on the AFC South?
Yeah, I think when you look at the AFC South, like you said, it's a bunch of young emerging quarterbacks. Right now, though, I think the Texans have to be the number 1 team going into the season. Why? When you look at that roster, I mean, look at the additions that they made. Stephon Diggs on offense, Joe Mixon. You can question what you want about him, but he's an upgrade to what they had last year at running back. You now on defense have Danielle Hunter. You have a couple, I believe Azeez Al-Shaair is also there, in addition to what they currently have with that core. Last year, the Texans, they surprised teams. You know, DeMeco Ryans obviously is head coach, C.J. Stroud as quarterback. They surprised teams and made the playoffs. This year, they go from, a playoff team to one of the top teams in the AFC. Now, they're a team that you definitely have to prove it. They're going to have to prove it that they are one of the upper echelon teams in the AFC. But this is a team that has true breakout potential, and that's why I'm excited for them. Go ahead.
Do you think they added too many weapons though to that offense? Do you think because a lot of times what happens is when you add star players, right, big name players, sometimes the chemistry or the team morale gets shaken up, right? Like they had Nico Collins, they had Tank Dell, they had Noah Brown, who was a great third complementary piece to Tank and Nico. Now adding a superstar receiver or a high level receiver, whatever we want to call Stephon Diggs, he also is a little bit of a diva. Like we have, that's something that's is apparent, right? When you don't last with the Minnesota Vikings and you want to leave, you can't last with Josh Allen and you want to leave. There's a question mark there. Do they add too many big name players where it's going to cause issues?
It's a part of the prove it for me, but to me, I still think that this is going to be a pretty well-gelled team. Now, Diggs, it seems like he's well accustomed there. Nico Collins is your big threat, I think Diggs, though, gets a healthy volume as the receiver 2 there. Tank Dell obviously settling in as the receiver 3 as well. And then Joe Mixon, he's been a guy who's been in a pass-first offense before with Cincinnati. He's known how it's kind of been, and he still gets a significant amount of volume. I believe over 200 touches, 200 carries specifically over the last few seasons. I think he's a guy who can generate or at least, create enough yardage with a healthy amount of touches. I think that's what he's going to get. So I don't think there's too many mouths to feed there in that defense or in that offense.
Yeah, I think that offense is a little interesting. I'm kind of curious to see how they meshed with each other. Now that division, you have the Texans winning it, correct?
I do.
How do you think the rest of the division is out? Who comes in second out of all those teams?
Yeah, I'm higher on the Colts. I think I like the Colts a little bit just because I think Anthony Richardson sees an ascension, and I think they made the right moves there. You know, assuming he's healthy, Leatu Latu, one of the top pass rushers in the draft, that's going to be a good addition. Have the core from before. This is a team that competed to make the playoffs last year with Gardner Minshew at quarterback. Now imagine an upgrade with Anthony Richardson, who should add a nice threat. Jonathan Taylor back fully healthy now. Remember, he missed the few games last year. And then you also now have a couple of, a little bit of a change. Michael Pittman's still there, but you have AD Mitchell, who should get into the mix. Josh Downs, who misses the first couple of weeks, he's there, and then you still have Al Pierce. You have a good receiver core. It's a good enough one, a young one. This is a young team, and so they're also in that prove it mode. But I think that they've got a good shot to potentially make the playoffs as well, as long as Anthony Richardson takes the next step, and more importantly, stays healthy.
I think I agree with you there. I think I have the Texans winning. My biggest concern is how does that offense mesh? Because if it doesn't mesh well, and then you have like chemistry issues, the offense could take a step back. And I think their offense needs to be a high-powered offense. In the AFC with so many great quarterbacks in the AFC, I think the Colts are next up and coming with Anthony Richardson. If he could bounce back and stay healthy and be a good quarterback, I think that team is pretty well. But I think the team that's being slept on is the Titans. I think they did a lot of good moves defensively to build around Will Levis defensively, and I think that's a smart thing to do. Is go build a good defense. So your quarterback doesn't have to do too much. Go get him a running game. Tony Pollard. I think that team has done a lot of nice things. Roster building. I'm excited to see how the AFC South shakes up. I have the Texans winning that division as well. The next division that we have on the radar is the AFC West. Now everyone knows AFC West. You got the two-time reigning champs. I hate that team. The Chiefs. You got the Raiders, the Chargers with Jim Harbaugh, and then you got the Broncos. The Broncos will be starting Bo Nix, a rookie quarterback. Raiders are starting Gardner Minshew, and then obviously over there with the Chargers, you have a whole new regime, and you have Justin Herbert. What's the AFC West looking like?
Yeah, AFC West, obviously the Chiefs there, the reigning champions, and it seems like it's the Chiefs and then the rest. That's kind of just what it seems like with this
Chiefs
division.
And then Taylor Swift. That's what it is. Chiefs, Taylor Swift, and then the rest. Do you think the question regarding Taylor Swift?
Oh, no.
She was in the NFL's hype video, right, for the season 5 times, more than a lot of big-time players. Do you think the NFL pushes the Taylor Swift narrative like they did last year because of how big of a pop star she is and how famous? She's one of the biggest, right? Do you think Taylor Swift deserves the recognition to be at these sporting events and like being on camera? You could be like, I'll give you the option to say I decide to not answer because you don't want Swifties coming after you, which I respect, but also I'm going to tell you off air that's a weak move to not say it if you're against it, because honestly, I'm all for it. I don't care. I think it brings a great audience to the game of football. I think it brings an audience that wasn't there. And in my opinion, the more eyes on football, the better, higher revenue and stuff. What are your thoughts on Taylor Swift, man?
Yeah, to me, I don't care. The reason being, seems like it brings good attention to the NFL. It brings an additional viewership. I also don't use the social media aspect that much, so maybe I don't see how much she gets pushed as much as other fans, and so that's kind of the.
We'll try this out. Every show I do for the remainder of the year, I will hashtag Taylor Swift as one of my tags to see how it works. I guarantee you it blows up. You don't know why? Her following is absolutely insane. It's huge. That's how big it is. And I think that's why the NFL was like, hey, if we keep putting her on the camera, our revenue numbers are going to go up. And they actually did marketing wise for how many viewership certain games were.
Right. And so that kind of, I think it's a fine thing, just because in general it seems viewership's going to go up, and it also seems like things like jersey sales go up, and so I think it's a positive thing for that regard.
Outside of that, AFC West, Chiefs, Raiders, and everything else, who do you have winning that division, and how does the rest of the division play out?
Yeah, I think the Chiefs win, and I think it's fairly straightforward. The other three, I don't know if they're going to even be playoff teams, but I think I got trust in the Chargers a little bit more than the other teams. The reason being the Chargers have, Justin Herbert, but also that Jim Harbaugh style. You bring back Greg Roman. I think it's going to be a run first attack, and I think that they're going to just harp on physicality. Now, the talent on that team, I don't know how it's going to be, but you still have Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack. Assuming they can be healthy for at least half the season, that's going to help you. And you're hoping that the curse of them, just choking games goes away and they become better in one-score games. We'll see how Harbaugh's clock management and all the game management skills are, this time around. But I think ultimately that team right now, it seems like it's going to be better than you might anticipate given their roster. Broncos, Raiders, they both have good players. They both can be competitive, and you always see one of these teams steal a game from their respective division rivals. And so I think that they've got a chance to be competitive. I just don't see the teams outside of the Chiefs making the playoffs.
I 100% agree with you. I think the Chiefs are super built. Obviously, Mahomes and Reed over there. Raiders going to be interesting with Gardner Minshew, Aiden O'Connell over there, and what they're building. Obviously, they have a good defense and everything like that. I'm just kind of curious to see how Jim Harbaugh handles things, because you have the quarterback, your defense has talent, but it just has never been good. It's like something that's been really weird about their defense is like they have talent. They just defensive coordinator over there has always been bad. Obviously, their receiving game receivers aren't great. Josh Palmer's, if you're into fantasy, probably going to be their number one receiver over there outside of Ladd McConkey, which I think Ladd McConkey might not be their number one receiver. I think it's going to be Josh Palmer. I wouldn't touch the receivers unless you're taking a flyer late in the fantasy drafts over there. But for me, I'm most excited to see Jim Harbaugh. I'm not a huge Jim Harbaugh supporter. I think Jim Harbaugh is an interesting person. Curious to see how he changes that culture around. Now, going into the AFC East, we'll do quick AFC East real quick. This is the last division in the AFC. Bills, Dolphins, Patriots, and Jets. Obviously, Patriots suck. They're not making the playoffs. It's between Bills, Dolphins, and Jets. Who do you think wins that division, and how does Aaron Rodgers look?
I think this is competitive. Definitely one of the more competitive divisions in the NFL. Bills, Dolphins, Jets, because the Bills, they've been the winners, but they also lost a good amount of talent this year, both on offense and on defense. The Jets, you obviously add some certain pieces to the mix, but they're also old and you have some injury prone guys there. Aaron Rodgers also coming off the torn Achilles, and the Dolphins is the team that just continues to ascend, but also lost some key members of that defense as well, and so I think that there's a lot of mixing here. I think the Jets are the most boom or bust team. I think the Dolphins are the team, though, that's going to end up winning the AFC this year.
Wow.
I've been a
the AFC?
Sorry, AFC East.
I was like,
AFC
oh shit! I was like, damn, they're making the Super Bowl. Oh damn, that's a big one.
AFC East. Let me re-speak. I think the Bills are going to be competitive again. I wouldn't be surprised to see 3 playoff teams here if the Jets can stay healthy and things like that. But I think they give the Dolphins the edge, even though I've been a Bills guy in the past.
I think this is probably the hardest division to rank, because there's so many question marks in this division. Aaron Rodgers' health, the Jets' defense, I think, is phenomenal. I think Jets' defense is so good that it could win them the division. That would win them the division as long as Aaron Rodgers stays healthy and plays at 50% of what Aaron Rodgers is. Because their quarterbacks last year were so atrocious, so terrible, that they couldn't get no offensive production. They were winning games 9-3 or 9-6 when they would win games. That, to me, shows how great their defense is. Obviously, if they get Hassan Reddick, even a bigger addition, where I think he'll eventually come back at some point, I think the Jets win the division. I think Aaron Rodgers stays healthy. I think they win the division. I think then the Buffalo Bills, I think the Bills are going to be solid. An elite quarterback like Josh Allen should be able to carry the offense and do enough with that offense. So I'm taking them second. Then I'm going to take the Dolphins. I think their offensive line got a little bit worse. I think their run defense is going to get worse, losing Christian Wilkins. But I think all 3 teams should make the playoffs. Now, flip a coin any other day. You could put Dolphins at first and Jets at third, or vice versa with any of those 3 teams. I think that's a really good division over there. NFC, kind of important when it's the NFC. We'll start with the most random division. In my opinion, I think the NFC South is super duper random because
Yeah.
this is literally a coin flip for out of three. Honestly, I might just put the Lions in there, the Panthers in there too to win the division. Like flip a coin, any of those teams can win the division. That's how weird this division is.
I think right now when I look at this division, I probably lean the Falcons, but you are right in that it's weird because the Falcons also have some unknowns, right? New head coach, new OC, Kirk Cousins coming off an Achilles tear. But I think the way that they set up this team, especially with some of their recent additions, you add a lot on defense. Matthew Judon's there, Jesse Bates is there. You have a couple of solid additions, right, to that defense. I think that this team is playoff bound. They also benefit from the NFC South schedule. So it's really as long as they win their division games, they should be in good shape. But overall, to me, I think it's the Falcons. But I think the Buccaneers are a close team, and I also think the Saints are a close team where all three could end up winning it. Obviously, the Bucs did last year, retained a number of key pieces. I think that was big, but I'm going to go with the Falcons.
And when you look at everything like this, like with the Falcons and everything, I think the Falcons have the most complete roster in this division because they have the better quarterback. They have a good, solid receiver, running game. Their defense is better than the other ones. But man, what Baker did last year with the weapons he has, but losing the OC, I think that's going to affect Baker a little bit. I think it's going to be a big curveball for that roster, and I think we're going to end up seeing the division won by the Saints. Yeah, the Saints. I truly think the Saints end up winning this division. Usually we see Derek Carr play better his second year in an offense. I think their defense is really good. I think the Falcons and the Saints both make the playoffs in the NFC somehow. And if the Saints don't win it, it'll end up being the Falcons. I think the Falcons I don't know. There's something about the Falcons that I'm like, something about them. I personally think the Falcons have the better quarterback.
Is it their ability to choke?
Yeah, I think so. I think there's something about him. Like, I don't know. There's the gut feeling that I would take the Saints. And I'm not a big Carr fan. I'm not. But I think usually in the second year he does well. They have a good defense. Alvin Kamara, Chris Olave. I think they have enough to win the division. Let's go NFC North. I think this is probably another division that's like, geez, this division is tough because technically you got the Packers and Lions who probably are going to compete their asses off against each other. You got Sam Darnold, who's the best quarterback in that division. And then you got Caleb Williams, who's the first overall pick in this past draft. So you obviously Sam Darnold being the best quarterback in the division is going to impact the standings, of course. So what are your thoughts on the NFC North and hopefully regarding the 808 Niners? Our D is going to be bad because Staley was calling the defense. Thankfully, Staley's not calling the defense, and it's Nick Sorensen over there calling defense. So that's a good thing. Papa J says there's two type of people, the ones that fell and then crumble, and then there's the ones who fell and then succeed. You're not wrong. But let's talk about the NFC North. What's your thoughts, Rohan? You're muted.
Keep hitting the wrong dang buttons, I swear to God. But we get NFC North. I think it's a competitive division. I really do. Just because you have the Packers and the Lions there with the uncertainty of the Bears mixed in. Now, I think the Vikings probably end up being the worst team in the division, with Sam Darnold being the guy.
Put some respect on him.
We'll see. We'll see. But I think that they end up being the worst just because I have higher expectations for Caleb Williams in year one to potentially be a fringe playoff team. But I think this division is between the Packers and the Lions. And I think you could go either way. The reason, though, that you might lean one way or another, when it comes to the way that these teams are complete, I think I don't know, maybe I go with the Lions. I think I go with the Lions just because when it comes down to playoff football, the things that you look at, one, the run game, I think that that's going to be important. And two, I think they have an improved defense. And so because of those two reasons, I think I have the Lions edging them out. I could very well, though, see the Packers winning the division, and I expect the Bears to be a fringe playoff team.
I agree. I would agree that this is a tough division with the Lions and Packers. The Bears, the uncertainty there with the quarterback situation, how well does Caleb Williams play. If he plays good enough with the weapons he has, they may have a solid defense. But I'm gonna go Packers winning this division. When I look at the Packers, one thing that I kept noting when I was watching that, when I saw who they signed and what they were doing over there, I like them adding Xavier McKinney. I like them adding or getting rid, I should say, not necessarily adding, but letting go of Dave Campbell, who the Niners picked up. I'm not super sold on him. Their defense is going to be much better, but Jordan Love and adding Josh Jacobs to that roster and not really losing much, I think they have the recipe to go out and beat a team like the Lions. I think Jordan Love is the X factor here. I'm going to go Jordan Love over Jared Goff. I think Jordan Love is a better quarterback. So that's why I'm leaning there. Not much to it. I think that division is super hard. I think it's going to be a very tough division. NFC East, or should I say the NFC least? You got the Cowboys. You got the Giants, who are atrocious. You got the Eagles and the Commanders, who have Jaden Daniels. What are your thoughts on the Commanders with Jaden Daniels in that division?
Yeah, I think when you look at this team, specifically if you talk about the Commanders, they're another team with that uncertainty level. And the Commanders are a weird team, you know. They rank among the worst defenses in the league, but they have pieces. They have Daron Payne, Jonathan Allen. They just signed Dorrance Armstrong. You know, this is a team that really looked to revamp their team this year, you know, in the first year of I guess, of the Jaden Daniels era. And so this is a team that could have some promise. Obviously, offensively, they still have Terry McLaurin, as a key piece there. You still have some of the main options. Brian Robinson's not bad at running back. The offensive line, you signed Tyler Biadasz. I believe they also signed Nick Allegretti. So you've got two new starters. It's a different team. Now, I still think that this division goes down between the Eagles and it goes down between the Cowboys. I will have the Cowboys probably pulling this one off, even though they lost pieces. You saw the Eagles win at the end of last year. They looked to respond. They added Bryce Huff. You lose Hassan Reddick. Obviously, that situation's going on. You add Saquon Barkley to the mix. That's a pretty big addition overall. Pretty big addition overall. You do lose a guy like Jason Kelce, but they had a replacement in Cam Jurgens. I believe they added Mekhi Becton to start over there. To me, though, the question about the Eagles still remains, and that is at the linebacker position, and that's also at the cornerback position. They added talent in the draft at corner. It's just how quickly will they, assimilate? And the other part about it, at linebacker, how good will their linebackers be? And will
Not a fan of Devin White?
What's going to be the plan there? No, not a big fan. Not a big fan. I know they added Devin White.
An upgrade. But
he is an upgrade. He's an upgrade, and he'll be pretty good. When it comes down near the line of scrimmage, it's just I'm not sure. And with the Cowboys, I know they don't necessarily have the best running game. You lose Tony Pollard. The offensive line loses Tyron Smith. But I trust enough in that offense with Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb, and company to still put up a fairly prolific offense. And then defensively, remember, Trayvon Diggs was out for the entire year last year. Now you're pairing him with Deron Bland once he comes back from injury. Those two ball-hawking cornerbacks, I think, is going to be a nice duo there in the back, in the back end. And I think Micah Parsons just continues to grow. So I'm excited about this team, and I think this is going to be another very competitive division. I will go with the Cowboys.
I agree with this division. It's very competitive. Looking at the defenses, I think Cowboys have a better defense than the Eagles. Looking at the offense, I think the Eagles are going to have a better offense overall because they have the run game, they have the passing game, at least the receivers to pass the ball. Not necessarily. We don't know if Jalen Hurts bounces back and has a better year passing the ball, but I do think the Eagles are going to be a really good team. Those two teams definitely make the playoffs. I'm excited to see Jaden Daniels over there. I like what Adam Peters did with the O-line. Someone knocking on my door? No, I don't know. But revamped the O-line. Really good team over there. The way he's built the stuff. Dan Quinn, obviously their head coach. Question mark at the offensive coordinator spot. But man, the division's really good. Between those top two teams, really good teams. Now the NFC West, and this is probably the most important one because this is obviously. Oh, it's my wife. Hold on.
I'll continue to talk. NFC West, one of the more competitive divisions. When you look at the 49ers, the Seahawks, the Rams, and the Cardinals. We'll start from the bottom of the division from last year. The Arizona Cardinals, they improved. And this is a team that did not have Kyler Murray, right, for a good portion of last year. We good. And then it's sad.
Where's my wife? What the heck?
We good. I was just talking about the Cardinals, the NFC West. Cardinals, they're a team that's improved and they'll have Kyler Murray here for a full season. Then you've got the other three. The Seahawks regressed last year, but are expected to improve this year with a healthier offensive line. You've got the Rams, who are still there, a playoff team from a year ago, and then the Niners, who won the NFC last year. How do you kind of feel about it? You can go first.
So this is really a good division. When I look at the Niners division, I think it's pretty solid, man. Looking at the Rams, I like what the Rams did with their O-line. Puka, Cooper, really good receiving group right there. I think Matthew Stafford is probably the best quarterback in the division still. Even though Brock Purdy's in the division, I think he's probably the best quarterback in the division. They have Kyron Williams, Blake Corum, so they can run the ball. Defensively, it's a bunch of young guys on defense, but I think their defense is going to be much better than people give them credit for. When I look at the Rams defense, I think the Rams as a total, as an offense and a team as a whole, I think they give the 49ers the biggest issue to win the division. And what I mean by that is if the Niners can't stop the run or the Niners can't stop the play action with Matthew Stafford, I think it could become a long game for the 49ers. They got better at even though the Rams lost Aaron Donald, which is a huge loss. Like it's super big. Adding Tre'Davious White to their secondary, if he can stay healthy, that's a big one. Adding Cam Curl at safety is a big addition. They upgraded where they needed to upgrade. I think the Rams are a really good defense. I think it's a defense that, yes, it is unproven, but I think it's going to be better than it was last year. And in the last year, I thought their defense played pretty well, good enough for the offense to be able to carry the team. The Niners, I think their run game is not going to be as good as it was last year, and teams are going to be able to run the ball on them. And that's going to be an issue is when you're having teams run the ball at a high rate, can you get them off the field? How tired does your defense get with having to play an extra 10 snaps a game, right? Like that's big on teams, and people don't realize that. Obviously, their offense for the 49ers is one of the best in the NFL. Seattle, I think that's going to be a fun game for the 49ers to play. Because when you have McDonald over there who schemed up such a well executed game plan for the 49ers in Ravens game, is he going to bring that same game plan to go against the 49ers? Obviously, you could go press man across the board. You're blitzing heavy, making Brock Purdy do certain things that you don't want him to typically do. How does that look with McDonald? I think Ryan Grubb is absolutely the biggest, in my opinion, the biggest coordinating hire in the NFL this year. I think Ryan Grubb was one of the best coordinators in college football. People don't know the name Ryan Grubb. They're going to remember his name after this year when their offense looks much better. And people are going to be like, oh, it's Geno Smith. I understand it's Geno Smith. But when you turn on the film, it's going to be an actual offense now. It's going to be actual routes being ran, space being open, running the ball with Kenneth Walker. I think those are the top three teams in the division. I think the Cardinals may have one of the worst defenses in the NFL. And I'm not just talking this year, possibly NFL history. Their defense is going to be that bad. Marvin Harrison Jr. over there, Trey McBride, Kyler Murray. They should have a respectable offense with James Conner running the ball. When it comes down to the division, I think the 49ers and the Rams will dictate the division. I think the Rams are good enough to win the division, but I think the Niners have too much firepower as a whole, defensively and offensively, to not win the division. I would be absolutely shocked if the Niners did not win the division. And if they don't win the division, I think that is big enough for the 49ers to decide to make a change. With all the rumors going around, I think that could be something the 49ers talk about. I think the Rams make the playoffs, and I would not be shocked to see the Seattle Seahawks fighting for that 7th seed to also be part of the playoffs. I think Niners will end up being the number 2 seed in the NFC 2 to 3 seed in the NFC. I think whoever wins the NFC North is the 1 seed. Going to be interesting to watch the Niners this year, Rohan. Who do you have winning that division?
Yeah, I have the Niners winning the division as well. Rams are a competitive team. I think that they should make the playoffs. Like you said, I believe Seattle is also going to be in the playoff mix. There are a couple of teams, in that for the 7th seed, it's a little less competitive than the AFC. But when you're talking about those teams, you're talking about maybe, the Seahawks. You're talking about the Chicago Bears. You're talking about could a team like the Commanders make a push? Could one of those NFC South teams, because of those easy schedules, could they make a push for that 7th seed? I think that those are the possibilities you're really talking about for that final playoff spot. Obviously, you're going to probably have 2 teams from the NFC North and the NFC West. So you've got one final spot really to try and see where that last spot or last team will go. But I think the Niners win this one. I think that with the team they have back, the comfortability they have back, I think that they look good. And I even am going to go as far as to say I think they should win the 1 seed. You talk about the NFC North. I do believe the Niners are going to win the 1 seed. And the good thing is you'll know during the year who's going to be the 1 seed, because guess what? The Niners play a lot of these teams. They're going to play, I believe they play Dallas, but I know they play both of the NFC North teams because that's the division they end up playing this year. They're going to play Green Bay, here in Lambeau Field. They're also going to play the Detroit Lions. They're going to play a lot of these top teams, so you'll be able to see kind of them against the top level competition during the regular season and get a good test before the playoffs.
Yeah, it's definitely gonna be exciting. I think to be honest, I think the Rams gave me the biggest scare for the division. I think they have the recipe to beat the Niners, run the ball, and if the Niners can't, and they have the offensive line. I think that so does the Seattle Seahawks. They have the offensive line and defensive line to compete. So that's what's kind of worries me is the Niners defensive line run game. How do they respond when teams start pounding the ball and punching them in the mouth? How do they stop the run? I think that's going to be the biggest question mark for me. And who wins the division? Rohan, who wins the NFC and who wins the AFC? So what's your Super Bowl prediction for the NFL?
Yeah, that's a good one because this is, thinking about the playoffs as well. And I don't know if Niner fans really want to hear mine. I think that coming out of the NFC, I think it's going to be the Niners again. And I don't want to be repetitive, but I also think it's going to be the Chiefs once again, because that's a team that continues to just get better, right? When you talk about the draft, that's a team that got better. I know a lot of fans, I know you especially, were pointing to a certain Chiefs draftee that you wanted the Niners to have, Kingsley Sewell-Matiah. He's a plug-and-play starter for the Kansas City Chiefs. Xavier Worthy could be their number 1 receiver by the end of the year. And so when you talk about the Chiefs' problems, they're finding solutions to the problems in the draft and then hoping that they develop well enough by the time the Week 18, the Super Bowl kind of comes, or, the playoffs and the Super Bowl kind of comes. And so to me, I don't see a difference. I think it's going to be the Chiefs going and the Niners going, just because right now, the Niners right now look like the best team in the NFC West. And if you're worried about any of the cohesion issues, those should definitely be smoothed out by the time the playoffs come around. I expect them to win the 1 seed, which also should kind of help their path. And I think the Chiefs are going to be the team to beat. I think they also benefit from an easier regular season schedule with their division. And so I think that they're the team to beat in the AFC as well.
I think it's absolutely definitely going to be the Chiefs coming out of the AFC. I don't think there's a team that can knock the Chiefs off. Like, you have to beat the Chiefs in what's their stadium called?
Arrowhead?
No, it's not Arrowhead. Is it?
The Chiefs one? Arrowhead.
Yeah,
Arrowhead Stadium. Yeah.
Why do I think it was Heinz Field?
That's Pittsburgh.
Yep, you're right. You're not. Yeah. I don't know why I was thinking Pittsburgh's field. But you got to go into Arrowhead. You got to beat them because they remember they're calling it Burrowhead. So you got to go into Arrowhead and you got to beat the Chiefs at home against Mahomes, against a really good defensive coordinator. That's a hard team to beat, man. I think the Niners, I don't know if they make the Super Bowl, man. I don't. I think a lot of other teams in the NFC got better. The Niners stayed the same. But I'm gonna go Chiefs and Niners. As a Niners fan, I want to see the Niners there. But if I stepped away as a Niners fan, and I would go Chiefs and Lions. I could see the Lions being a sneaky team to make the Super Bowl. Papa J says if the Rams get the number 1 seed, it's okay because when we face them, it'll be a home field advantage for us. Absolutely, we're going to Levi South and win in Levi South as well. So, Rohan, I know you got to get out of here. You got important things to do. Thanks for joining me today on today's show. Thank everyone for joining today. Make sure to hit that like and subscribe button. Go over to Rohan Chakravarty's personal channel as well. Hit that subscribe button in his channel as well. Make sure to hit that notification bell so you know when Collect Gene Sports is going live to talk about football throughout the NFL season. Appreciate every single one of you guys for tuning in. Ooh, not Roger saying y'all choking the playoffs at SoFi. He's not wrong. Unless you're talking, the only player that choked in that game, in my opinion, was Jaquaski Tart. And also, we don't have the same quarterback. So.
But are they really ever going to go back to the playoffs at SoFi this year? The Rams have to win the division for that to be a possibility.
Strong possibility, but who knows? Definitely appreciate everyone for tuning in. Rohan, thanks for joining me, brother. Peace out.